Central. That's my territory. I have about,
Well,
go ahead. You can go
Okay.
next.
Next,
Yes. Number four there, my business address is in Bloomington. I physically live in Nashville, where I've been remotely working for about 4 months. I'm on the road now a lot, and I do still work a couple days remotely. But I cover about 246 towns, 26 counties, 15 to 20 chambers of commerce are my best allies. I also work right here with John Myers. He's the Small Business Development Center. He works at the same corporation I do, but on the business side for startup business planning, bank loans, bank packaging, your PPP, EIDL type business side. And then I work on the government side. When you want to sell something to one of the 5 governments, which I'll cover here in a little bit. But I go out in that territory out there, and my counterparts up in the Northwest is Diane. She's up in Lafayette and also Crown Point. Fort Wayne, the position is vacant right now, but we're interviewing people. Nate Lofton is in the Central. He's in Indianapolis downtown near the Capitol. And down in Evansville is Jim Hayden. And that's the 5 of us. And we all work for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation under the Defense Department. And it's because we're trying here in Indiana to improve our market share of federal, specifically DoD contracts, to bring them into our states. But my focus is mainly area number 4, and to help those businesses that are located in that area. Even though I did get a call yesterday from a young woman business owner over in Richmond, and I'll be working with her until we get someone hired up in the Northeast. So we don't say no to anybody unless they're not from our state. It's all about Indiana businesses here. So I'm with the PTAC, and some of the things that we provide, it's a no cost. The funding comes from Department of Defense, Defense Logistics Agency, half of it, and the other portion comes from the Indiana Economic Development Corporation in the state of Indiana. So I'm a state employee, and I always tell businesses, if it's got a .gov at the end of it, that's free. If it has a .com, it's a fee. So if you start working with me as your primary counselor, I will exhaust free as much as I can. If you have some costs involved in what you're doing with the government, you need to run it by me, let me look at it. And I'm your advocate. I'll tell you whether it's a fee-based company or it's worth your salt. I would say majority of them are pretty viable companies, but I can also show you another way to get it done, accomplished free. So I do one-on-one counseling, and I've been doing this since about 1997, and I've worked in the states of Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, and now in Indiana. And I also assist in the certification and registration assistance, such as I mentioned the 5 governments. What I'm talking about there are town, city, county, state, and federal. Those are all different governments. They all have their different fundings. They all have their different registration systems and certifications. The federal government probably has the most certifications through the Small Business Administration. And then as it trickles down, most towns don't have certifications or verifications. They just have registrations to sell your services or your products to them. I do subcontracting assistance. If you win a project or you want to team with somebody, I'll be your advocate to find that other team member. Or if you want to be a subcontractor with a larger company or big corporation, I can do the same, can mentor protege programs. SBA has some good ones at the federal level. Most towns, they'll leave it up to, if you're the prime in a town or a city or a county, they leave it up to you to find your own teaming partners. But I'm a good advocate for you because I'm traveling around this area, and I also have 4 others I can team with. Good example of this, we had a company from New Jersey call us up to demolish some buildings. They won a contract out of New Jersey for Camp Atterbury, and they wanted to use local businesses. So right away, Nate and I got together and referred to them Indiana businesses that could do that work, even though the prime would be in New Jersey and the subs would be out of Indiana. So we're kind of like Match.com between the vendor and the governments. Now, product and procurement, is identifying, what are your products. And the federal government, state government use product service codes, PSCs. State governments have their own commodity codes sometimes. And we help you find out what those codes are so we can talk to these government contracting people and their buyers and the codes that they identify with. And I'll get into that a little bit more. We do workshops and events, and we collaborate with our local Chamber of Commerce, our economic development offices, the LEDOs, the area economic development offices, the extension offices through the Purdue University that are in each of the counties, all the way down to the city clerk and town administrators. I go out and use their facilities to do outreach events like this. In the future, as the COVID-19 evaporates, and hopefully it will in the next year or so, that I'll actually do physical workshops where you'll come in and we'll all be sitting around a table like this. Bid matching services. In Indiana, they got a great system called Bid Match, and we take your keywords from your website and your different registrations. We put it in a program, and it runs at night, and then it emails you bid notices by the 5 governments in the areas that you choose. So if I was like John Myers with, not John, I'm sorry, John, Jeff with Applied Technology, and I was working nationally, well then I could build that program where we look for bids at night nationally for town, city, county, state, and federal. It'd be put into your email, and then you and I could get together and take a look at those opportunities and decide which ones we want to bid on or which ones we just want to market to. And then the GSA schedule, that stands for the General Service Administration. That's the federal government. That's kind of like the difference between going to Walmart and shopping on your own and looking at the prices of stuff, or staying at home and doing Walmart online. If you do it online, like Amazon or whatever, those are schedules. That's where they schedule certain prices for locked-in items that they're pushing or trying to sell to the buyers. Well, if you do get yourself on a schedule with your mainly products, you can do services as well. There's a fee that you have to pay the government to be on there, and the government agencies that buy your products have to pay a fee as well. And you also have to market to it. But I can assist you in applying for a GSA schedule. And it's normally for companies that have a lot of products, and your price is locked in from 3 to 5 years, and there's a lot involved with it. But some are lucrative, some are not, and that's something I can assist you with. And then there's assistance with the federal regulations. Our Congress has a rule book called the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation. It's 52 chapters in it, and it governs all the rules of acquisition. It goes all the way back when George Washington started out in the American Revolution. These documents are in there and determine what an acquisition is and what a procurement is. Now, all the way down to towns and cities and counties, they don't have as many laws as they do ordinances that run their procurement. But a lot of time, if there's a misunderstanding or not knowing what those rules are, I can get with you and I can go to that town, city, county, state, and read those requirements to make sure that I'm your advocate representing you. And the bottom line for all this, there's no cost for an Indiana business for this. Next slide, please. So the PTAX exists to help small businesses compete in federal, state, and local governments being towns, cities, and counties. And we're located in all 50 states. There's over 500 of us, including Puerto Rico and small islands. We actually get together every fall in DC, right on New Jersey Avenue, between the House and the Senate. We're tested. We have to hold federal certifications to talk to the public and deal with the contracting offices. So both sides takes us seriously, and we have credentials. And then we're accredited every year through our courses that we take and through the conferences. And we also have a spring conference that right now, everything we're doing is virtual. So we still attain our accreditations as counselors. And PTAC is over 35 years old and started back in 1985. And it was an effort by the 1,200 federal agencies to have one agency kind of run this program and organize it for the public business owners, and specifically in Indiana, for an example, to have a representative that could explain a lot of these government requirements to them. Next slide. So the federal government, I'm going to talk about it first today because they spend the most money. And the big spender on that is the Department of Defense. And the DoD is one of 1,200 federal agencies. In the DoD, you have 9 services: Army, Navy, Air Force, Centers of Disease Control. You hear a lot about them lately. NOAA, the National Oceanics. All of them, those services have rank and they have uniforms, and they're all under the DoD. The only one that's separate is the Coast Guard, because they're under the Tobacco and Firearms. They're outside the DoD and the Veterans Administration. But the federal government's a big spender, and you can see right now that they're spending well over $4 trillion. And the things that they're looking for to move us into the future is the innovative and keeping prices competitive and getting reliable items that are sent to them to be used. Now, I'm a veteran. I've been in combat. I can tell you that I'm so glad that I had American manufacturers that manufacture things that saved my life to be here today. And that's on the reliable end of products and services. And if they didn't take it serious with their top total quality control and their calibration and testing, there could have been lives at stake. So it's very important that in what I'm sharing with you and that we do for our military, that our items and our products and services are reliable. There's different types of sales contracts. I'm going to just give you 3. The federal government, from $1 to $10,000 is called a micro purchase. It's also called a credit card. And they call them P cards. And many federal government people that have the buying authority can use a credit card up to $10,000 to purchase a service or a product. The next threshold is called a specified acquisition. That's from $10,000 to $100,000. Doesn't require a contract. It can be a blanket purchase agreement. And it can be a thing that's a project that has to occur quickly. We have 15 days left with the federal government before they end their fiscal year. So they're in a fury to settle up with their budgets so they don't have to deobligate any money back to the U.S. Treasury by the end of the month. So they're looking right now. Now's a good time to be marketing and talking to government federal buyers on their budgets to assist them. And the last threshold is contracts. That's 100,000 or more. If a buyer in the federal government wants to put out a contract, it goes to a contracting officer, and it's determined through market research it's going to cost more than 100,000. Then they will put out a solicitation. They take in bids, proposals, and they call them different things. For construction, it's an IFB, invitation for bid. If it's for a project, it's usually an RFQ, request for quote. And if it's for a program, it's usually an RFP, request for proposal. And I'll get into more of that in a little bit on how I can assist you with that as a counselor and my counterparts throughout the state. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the scorecard. SBA is responsible to watch over the 1,000, 1,200 federal agencies to make sure they're spending and putting things out to set-asides that they've certified. That's on the left, the small business, over 23%. They have to set aside for spending for small businesses, 8% is for women-owned businesses, and it goes all the way down and to the hub zone. And you can see there the achievement 2018, how they did throughout the federal government, and the goal in 2019, and then the achievement in 2019. And I kind of highlighted the hub zone down at the bottom right because they didn't make that goal. Even though they set aside $11 billion, they missed the goal of 3%. So as a counselor, I'm constantly looking for assisting more companies either relocate into hub zones or make sure that they are in a hub zone, that they are taking advantage of that and get that certification. Like here in Columbus, Cindy and I talked about this earlier, Melissa, that there is a hub zone here in Columbus, and it's right along here at State Street and Central Avenue and runs down 46. all the way down to where Boyer Machine is and over to the river. And that stands for Historically Unutilized Business Zone. That means that area is 80% less than the state's average GDP, and it's greater than the state's unemployment of 12%. And what the federal government's trying to do is award contracts in these historically underutilized business zones that will bring them up to those standards. So next slide, we'll take a look at what DOD does in our state. With Muscatatuck and Camp Atterbury and all the National Guard armories, Army Reserve centers, the DOD buildings, Crane, I'm missing, but yeah, Jefferson Proving Ground. I work with all these installations, and they have the same type goals, and you can see their 218 achievement and what the goal was in 219. But something happened here that I've highlighted in blue there. They didn't make on the DOD side the women-owned small business goals or their hub zone again. And the spending in DOD is, of course, a lot less, but it's more than other federal agencies. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to improve women-owned small businesses winning more contracts and assisting these federal agencies in making their goals. And also, for me, getting those women-owned businesses certified by the SBA and more businesses certified for the hub zone. So that's a little personal goal I have in my territory. Next slide, please. So I come up with this success word I've used for a long time. I'm a retired Army Ranger, and I use this in my 25 years of service. And same type of 7 steps to success, but I converted it over to government contracting because it still fits. And number one, you got to self-assess your readiness to sell to the government. You know, what is it? Are you selling a service or a product? Are you selling a service in a product? And what is it? I just met with a business recently, and I go, well, give me a key list of all your key words that represent your products and services. Give me a self-assessment. And they did, and they gave me 5 words that represented their company. Well, then I looked at their website, and I looked at their federal SAM registration, and I looked at their dynamic small business search with the SBA, and I looked at their capability statement, and I came up with 15 words. So my view as a government person was entirely different from their view of themselves. So that's one thing I assist with as a counselor is that self-assessment. And then we can take those key words and go on to the different government coding systems and convert them over to the codes that the governments use in their transactions for solicitations. Number 2, we want to complete the initial registration. On John Meyer's side, he knows that on startup of a business, you've got to get it registered with the Indiana Secretary of State. You've got to get yourself a DUNS number, a data uniform numbering system, 9-character code through Dun & Bradstreet. You've got to have a business license registered. You've got to have a TIN number or EIN number, employee identification number or tax identification number with the IRS. These are your initial registration ingredients you need to make this cake. And then if you come over to the federal government and say, I'd like to get registered to sell my products and services to 1,200 agencies out there, whoever's interested, they call that SAM, System for Award Management. And the federal government's very organized. Like I mentioned earlier, I covered 246 towns, and each town has its own website, it has its own registration system. Not the federal government, it has one system for all 1,200 agencies. And they pay by electronic fund transfer. There's no checks. And they like to pay within 3 days if you invoice properly and everything else is lined up in the system. So the federal government is one with a good turnaround. They're well organized. They used to be the worst 20 years ago. Now they're one of the best. And on that complete initial registration, number 2 there, if we go start at the federal government, then what we're after there is what's called a CAGE code, Commercial Activity Government Entity Code. That makes us a business entity to sell our services and products to the federal government. That requires anybody in the world that wants to do that. They can be in China or down in the Bahamas, but they got to be on that system. And when they put in some of the things that I mentioned that John's familiar with on startup businesses and that, your credentials and registrations. When it goes in there, Homeland Security looks at that SAM profile. The IRS looks at it. It does a hit on your bank routing number and account number and several other things. And when it comes back, Dun & Bradstreet, it issues the CAGE code. And with the CAGE code, everything opens up now. Now we can apply for the number 3, get our eligible certifications. I mentioned earlier, if you're a service-disabled veteran, service-connected, there's set-asides for you through the VA, and there's also set-asides coming forward with the SBA that'll be put out to these agencies. And that has a verification to it right now. Veterans are not certified by the federal government, even with the DD 214, but there's a process through the Center of Veteran Enterprise to have service-disabled veterans verified. A veteran-owned small business does not have a certification or verification. And I can explain the two of them if you fall in that category offline. You want to develop a marketing strategy. As a client working with me, the first thing I do is set up a government procurement action plan, or I do an assessment of where you're at and where you're taking yourself. And as you explain this to me and overlay it with your business plan or your strategic plan, and I can see your vision of where you're taking your company and how you want to leverage this government market with your commercial market, maybe international, then I can build that strategy plan with you. And once we got that done, then we move out of the administrative phase and out of marketing, and we look into finding bid opportunities. Remember, I talked about bid match. Bid match is going out and looking for bids. That doesn't stop anybody from going right to the faucet and going to any town, city, county, state, and just putting in the Google the word bids, Columbus, Indiana, and it'll come back with the municipality here and all their bids listed. You do the bids for Nashville, Indiana, for a town, their bids may come up. A lot of towns don't have their bids on their websites, but they'll post them in the local county paper or whatever. Federal level is different. They do it on the Federal Business Opportunities, what's now called beta.sam. And to help with all that, that's why we came up with Bid Match, to make that just one place you go to and have the bids coming at you. And then, of course, you got to submit a bid. I always counsel businesses that for every 4 bids you put in, you'll probably win 1. That's a conversion of 1 for every 4. If you did that once a week for 52 weeks, you'd win 32 contracts in 1 year. You'd win 26 in 24 months. Well, that would be a bid model, for an example, that I would hold you to and assist you with trying to go after. Of course, you can go crazy and put a bid in every 5 days a week times 52 weeks, and that even multiply that even greater. So when you do get a solicitation, I'll look at it with you. I'll assist in developing a draft timeline and outline, and I'll review your proposal before you submit it. The only thing I'm prohibited from doing is writing your proposal, because I may be working with multiple companies on the same solicitation. I'm under federal and state non-disclosure agreements, so I can't disclose anything about your company, even to other people in your company, unless you give me permission, outside that business, including your prices, your fully burdened rates, your other direct costs, your general administrative costs, your salary and fringe is all kept privately. And then number 7, you got to perform on the contract. That's real important. I had a business call me the other day. It said, Andy, I won this contract. What do I do now? It was his first government contract. And I go, well, let's take a look at it. So I went down to meet him and we looked over the contract. I go, we need to set up a plan on how you're going to adhere to this. So let's pull out your proposal and relook at it and compare it to the solicitation on how you said you were going to do it. And then how we're going to meet the contracting officer and how we're going to meet the buyer and kick this off. What's real important about number 7 is invoicing. I actually went to a business the other day and they were complaining about invoicing. And a lot of the problem was right there in the company. They weren't invoicing properly. So they had they were doing the work, but they weren't getting paid. So we figured that out. The next slide. So when you organize your government procurement action plan that I send to you, I usually try and keep it down to 1 page. If it's more than one page, it's too much. And I try and focus on 3 phases. You go back.
Yeah.
3 phases. Phase 1 is administrative phase. Phase 2 is marketing. Phase 3 is contracting.
Am I on the right slide?
Yeah, go back 1 and 1 more. Right there. So in the marketing phase, we're looking for bid opportunities. And where do you find those? Well, I can do some market research for you to show you where the government's been spending money. But a great site that you can look at right now is called USA Spending. It's one word, .gov. That's free, .gov. You go on there, you can put in a zip code right here for Columbus and see every contract, every PP agreement, loans, blanket purchase agreements, micro purchases that was done in this one zip code to see what your competition's doing, what farmers are being awarded to the NCRC or anything like that in an area. So you can kind of do a market study. So if you want to kind of look in your own area, what's going on around you as far as contracting, look at usaspending.gov. And there's others I can't go over right now because of time, but I can do that with you privately. Number 2, your first year in business, you should really kind of be going after micro purchases, credit card transactions, blanket purchase agreements, the first 2 thresholds I talked about. And you should be finding the prime contractors. And there's a federal website, subnet.gov, that you can go to that has all of them listed on there. And you'll market your capability statement to them and get signed up under their small business liaison officers who are looking for you. Because if they've won a federal contract, they're required by the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, to set up a subcontracting plan. And it has to have those different types of set-aside categories that you saw earlier for women-owned small businesses, service-disabled veterans, whatever the category is. And they've got to show that to the federal government that they're taking part of this money they've won and they're putting it out to small businesses as well. But if you're not negotiating or teaming with prime contractors or SPLOs, well, then you're losing out on that marketing effort. And number 3 is the bid match I talked about. Those are daily email notifications. And I can send it to multiple people within the company. This doesn't have to be the owner, it can be the sales team. And then, of course, this is matched through the words. That NACS acronym over there, that's the North American Industrial Classification System. It's a 6-digit numerical code that federal people, when they see it, a lot of times, if they get your business card at an industry day, they'll turn your business card, and if it's blank on the back, that means you do no government business. But if you have your DUNS number on the back of your card, and you have your NACS codes, maybe your CAGE code, they immediately know what that is. They know those codes. And the PSC codes are for products, product service codes. And I can assist you in finding these codes like I talked about earlier. Next slide. You still hear me, Cindy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Fussy sometimes.
Yeah.
There.
Well, it's been remembering a lot and I'm talking a lot. So submitting a government bid, you've got to read the solicitation without touching anything. Just read it. And then when you read it again, you want to make some notes about it. And I always use this poem when I read the solicitation. I knew 6 honest men. It taught me all I knew. Their names are what and where and when and how and why and who. What does the government want? When do they want it? Where do they want it delivered? What's the POP, place of performance? Things like this. What's this acronym mean? And I write that all down in there. And then once I get a gist of what this, like a case study, we learned this back in grade school in 5th grade, how to do a case study. But in a case study, you draft up a timeline and outline. You just draw a line across the paper and say, well, today is the 16th, and they want this on the 30th. So how many days do I have to really do to put this together? How many weekends do I have? Who will be at the company? Do I charge this against a charge number for business development? Am I just my own owner? I'm everything. I'm HR. I'm the CFO, the CEO. So how am I going to write this? And if you want me to review it, you got to put me in there and give me time to take a look at it and then get it back to you so you can edit. You may have questions to the contracting officer. The outline on the same piece of paper are just squares that show, oh, this requires a cover letter. And you got to fill out the standard form 1448. I'm just making that up. And you got to have a cost proposal, and they want a technical approach, and they want some resumes, and they want a copy of your capability statement. Well, that'd be more like an RFP, request for proposal. An RFQ would be a cover letter, capability statement, and your cost estimate, and how you came up with it. A lot of times the governments really don't care about your details or your spreadsheet that includes all your fully burdened rate. They just want one number. Sometimes though, especially the federal government, they want to know, well, how'd you come up with this fully burdened rate? Well, I did it. Here's my other direct costs. Here's my G&A rate, my general administrative costs. Here's my salary and fringe, and you may have to explain it, but a lot of times I've seen it very few times that you do. And you got to follow the directions. Sometimes it's the difference between the words help and HEP. HEP doesn't have L in it. You can't be helping people. They got to help themselves. When you start helping, you're not following directions. And I also use the word swag and SWOT. What we've done up to this point, 1 through 5, we've done a SWOT. That's looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats of whether you should even be bidding on this, whether you can afford it. If it does have a strength and low weakness, has great opportunity and low threat, then you should be bidding for it. And usually I do a break-off rule. If it scores 80% or higher, and I can tell you right away through my experience in working with you, whether it has a strong SWOT. Of course, a swag is a scientific wild ass guess. It's a lot of emotion and drama. You heard about this or that. You're not reading it twice. You're making no notes. You have no timeline and outline. And it's not that I'll get frustrated with you, but I'll try and get you back over to swatting again because you're not following the directions. And sometimes I see people, I had a woman-owned business here recently. They wrote a great proposal, but it was commercial. They didn't even respond back to the requirements that were in the statement of work. They explained how they would do this work according to their own standards. But when the vendor got it, they disqualified them for not meeting the criteria and the evaluation factors. So I had to teach them to quit doing that and quit duplicating things in the statement of work. And I got them back to responding to the actual requirements and then adding to them. So I'm gonna look at, we're doing good on time, so I'll explain this. If I have 2 contractors, one contractor, I want them to paint this room I'm sitting in. And I have a budget of $500. So the first contractor comes in, he looks around the room and he goes, oh, well, my cost estimate is $500 and I'll do it on Wednesday. Second contractor comes in, he doesn't give you a cost, but he looks around the room and he goes, well, I'll do this on Wednesday, but I'll cover this table up with plastic and the screens and the windows and the trash cans and different things to protect them. And I'll put plastic down and I'll spray these walls twice. And then I'll have you come in about 11 o'clock and take a look at it. And if you agree with it, then I'll continue 2 more layers and I'll be out of here by noon and I'll remove all the biohazard waste. Well, what I've done between the 2 contractors, and the second contractor, he can do it for $500 too in his cost. Well, one showed what? Best value. The other contractor showed maybe a low cost, but then he got beat out by best value. Well, that's what I teach all the time, and I'll ask you as your counselor, where's the best value in your proposal? I don't see it. And if I don't see it, then the government won't see it. So we want to show that best value. And there's ways things that I can show you on through my experience on how to bring that out. So submit it correctly and on time. Once I review it and I give it back to you, the proposal, I always say don't deliver it. Don't run down to Camp Atterbay trying to get in there 5 minutes before it's due, because you may not make it through the gate because you don't have the right pass, or they need to issue a pass and you're going to miss it. They will reject you if you're 1 minute late. It's over. And that proves to them that if you're working like that now, how are you going to work with them if you want it? So I always say deliver your proposal the day before. Then contact the contracting officer and say, hey, did you get my proposal? How did it look? Is everything in there? And of course, they'll give you feedback. You set up rapport with the contracting officer. And then you have time to maybe send them another document that you missed, or you can drive it down or whatever. And so let's go to the next slide. So performing on the contract. Now we won the contract, and the federal government is pretty cool on this. They don't actually issue you a paper contract anymore. The actual proposal that you submitted it on becomes your contract. They just post the contract award amount in the account classification right on it. And they use a thing called an MPIN, a marketing partnership identification number that you put on your SAM profile. That's your electronic signature. So now everything is done by electronic fund transfer. And a good example of this was during the stimulus checks that went out. Who were the first people that got the stimulus checks? Those with direct deposit electronic fund transfer. And a lot of those were people that were drawing Social Security and direct deposit checks from the federal government. Then the second wave was people that didn't have direct deposit, and they had to come up with these debit cards, and they had to use the US mail to give it out to them. So that was slow on doing that. So who do you want to be? You want to be the ones on the get a debit card in the mail, or do you want to be the ones electronic fund transfer within 3 days of delivering on a contract? So let's say we get our contract, we read it. I'll read it with you. And then I like to compare it back to your proposal and then to the solicitation, make sure that they didn't change anything, the government, and then make sure the funding matches the award that I submitted for the proposal. If not, I need to sit down with you and the contracting officer and take a look at the award amount. And you want to take some notes and you want to read the contract again. It's just like a script, because you'll be coming back to this contract while you're working the contract when you do the invoicing, and the buyer is inspecting your work to make sure that you're doing the deliverables and signing off on your invoice. So this is what I mean by get on the same page as the government contracting officer. A contracting officer is like a traffic cop. They're not the buyer. So let's take an example at Camp Atterbury. The post commander is a colonel, and her sergeant major come up with a requirement. They take it over to the contracting office. The contracting office creates the statement of work. They take it back to the colonel and they go, here's your requirements. Do you agree with this? And do you have the funding for this? And she transfers both to the contracting officer. He puts it out for bid because he has that authority. The colonel does not, because she's the buyer. So that's how they keep it separate. And then when the bids come in, only the contracting officer, upon review of the buyer, administers the contract. And then he's got to make sure that the contract is a good one and what he uses. Does he use a specified acquisition, a micro purchase, or is it a contract? And then you want to communicate constantly with the contracts team. That team is your team that's working on the contract to make sure you're keeping up your timelines and you're invoicing and you're meeting all the deliverables. Also communicating with the buyer to make sure they're satisfied. And not just for this project or this program, but for ones in the future. Because right now, I said we had 15 days left with the federal government. If the federal government doesn't approve a budget in 15 days, or they sequester the budget, well, then they're going to use money from this year to push it into October, November, and December. And then that means they're going to modify their contract. Well, you could end up earning more money on this contract by adding more deliverables, because they're still using you on a contract that was awarded in fiscal year 2020. So you want to make sure it's intact and it does well, and you communicate back with me. And if you have to meet with the contracting officer, I can go with you and assist you with that. Next slide. So in conclusion, you want to keep your registrations current, accurate. These the registrations with the 5 governments, and I can assist you with that. The federal government is the only one that every year you got to renew that registration. State governments throughout the United States, they last from 2 to 3 years. Most towns and cities and counties, it's indefinite. Very seldom do I see them expire unless it's a big city like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville. They have renewals on there. And some of the cities in the states and the federal all adhere to affirmative action, equal opportunity, so they do have diversity programs for certifications. Most counties and towns do not. And they just go out for usually low bid or sometimes best value. And right now, a lot of people are looking more and more to best value because they don't like to have sloppy work or work that's not completed. And then they got a mess, they got to put it out for bid again. You must market your company to be successful in government contracting. Remember the bid match I told you about? If I send you leads every day and you get 4 that day and you bid on 1 by Friday, well then by Friday, if you had 4 a day, and that's 16 that you didn't bid on, you should be marketing to them with your capability statement. That's a 1-page virtual document. Telling the contracting office, hey, I see you're interested in my products and services, but on this specific bid, we don't do that. But we do these things. We'd like to be considered. Well, right now, there's contracting officers looking for vendors with the federal government because they only have 15 days left. Now, these towns, city counties, and states, their buying calendars run from 1 January to the end of December. Some run from July 1st to the end of June. So you just have to get with me on how they end and how we should hit them on their fire sales. Number 3, in marketing and proposal preparation, I want to remind you to focus on what sets you apart from your competition. What's your differentiator? What's so different about your company that sets you apart through your credentials, accreditations, your background, your past performance, your best value? A lot of times I'll ask a company this and they don't know right away. And actually I see more in them than they see in themselves. And that's where I'll assist you to get that marketing message consistent and on your website, in your capability statement, on the System Award Management, and on the SBA's Dynamic Small Business Search. That's the marketplace where the federal government and state governments go all the time to look for vendors. And if your information isn't correct on there from your SAM record, then they miss out on you. So I can assist you with that. You want to get everything in writing. If I submit a bid proposal and I'm wondering, somebody say something? Oh. So if you submit a proposal and you don't hear back from the government, I always counsel you to contact the government within 10 days of submitting a proposal and ask them, was an award made? If an award is made and they haven't told you who it was awarded to, you request in writing a written debrief of who they awarded it to and how you rank, so you can learn from that. You can also team with other businesses that receive those awards. There's times when, if I had a small business and I didn't win the contract and I find out that Melissa's company won it, I would contact her in a week and say, Melissa, congratulations on that award. There's like 80 requirements on there. I bidded on it too, but really my specialties were for number 9, 15, 32, and 80. And I'd love to be a subcontractor or a team with you on that. Because I don't know if you have all your employees or all your supplies and equipment, but I do. And if you've got multiple projects, or Melissa had multiple projects going, I'd look very good to her as a teaming partner. She wouldn't see me as competition. So that's another way to look at competition in marketing. And learn from your experiences. If it was your cost that did it, it must be in your fully burdened rate. And as your counselor, I'll look at how you're coming up with your cost to see, do you have all your costs in there? And I have gone to companies and they told me, oh, I did make a lot of money on that contract. And they go, well, let me see your spreadsheet on what your costs were. What did you have in there that built that? Your other direct costs, your profit, your overhead, your workman's comp, all those ingredients that make that fully burdened rate. And then, of course, if you ever put a bid in and your fully burdened rate is higher than what was awarded, I've heard contractors say, well, they can't do that work, the people that want it. They'll be losing money. Well, they might. Maybe they're trying to win it just to be doing work for the government to show past performance. But I wouldn't bid on something I would be losing money on. I mean, the government would love for you to come in and do work for budgets that they don't have money for. So we don't want to do that. And I will advise you in some cases that you probably don't even want to bid on that, but you want to bid on this over here. I'm a big 4-to-1 conversion type thinker. And of course, PTAC and other free assistance is available. What's good about Indiana PTAC is every time I talk with you as a counselor, I post everything in our conversation and what I counseled you for. And then if I'm sick or I'm on leave or whatever, my counterparts can go on my records and continue their counseling with you. So there's no break in counseling. Next slide.
Hang on. Got a box open.
I think it's going to say that I work with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. That's up in Indianapolis. The director is prior Major General Tooley. My director is Christine Jeffries. For the state, we're on social media, as you see there. We're throughout the state. We're big collaborators with anybody. If you come to me, it's not about Andy, it's about everybody I represent. And that goes down to that city clerk in a little town that's looking for your good or service. Today, I'll drive back to Nashville, and when I'm driving down the road, that road was paid by the government, but contractors built it. That white line put on each side was a contractor. That yellow line down the middle was painted by a contractor. The fence lines, the keeping down the noxious weeds, the cutting of the grass, running the poles are all done by government contracts. So it's a matter of deciding when you're looking around and you're driving, what is it that I could suggest to the government, or what is it that they have out for bid? That's how you got to look at it differently. And how am I using the PTAC in my area? Next slide. So that's me. That's my email address. And I'm your area contracting specialist. So if you have a need for me, I think we got maybe 10 minutes. Yep, exactly. Can we take any questions, Cindy?
Yes.
Anybody have any questions?
Go ahead. Who has a question? I was going to point out that Michelle in her put a chat out for everyone saying that the certifications are the trickiest part.
Yes.
You want to comment on that?
Well, it depends on which they are. And in Michelle's case, as a woman-owned business, minority-owned business, there's 2 certifications by the SBA. They're done on certified.gov. I can assist you with that registration. They're not as bureaucratic as you would think. You're uploading, in that case, your birth certificate to prove gender and your certificate of organization from the Indiana Secretary of State. And it's put into a repository that contracting officers look at to verify that you have certified that you're a woman-owned business. And that's it. You self-verify that you're a minority on the SAM system. And the only other person that also verifies who you are is me as a PTAC counselor when I come to your business for my one visit. And or visit with you like I have with Michelle at the mill over in Bloomington. Anybody else?
Andy, in our first meeting, you mentioned some of the unusual businesses that you have helped. I mean, I think when we think about government contracts, we might think about paving, or we might think about Department of Defense parts or airplanes or whatever. What are some of the things we wouldn't necessarily think about as being a government product or service?
Well, I got a government that's printing DNA parts that's shipped in NASA spaceships. And every time a shuttle comes down, they get their equipment out of there and they get that printed DNA part and they take it back down towards New Albany, and they give it to that individual through surgery. It was printed in space. There's artificial intelligence. There's psychiatry. There's assistance with veterans. I have the locks down at the McAlpin locks. We just took two 40-foot cast iron gears out of the river, had them sanded down to be re-welded and painted. They've been in the river for over 4 years. They'll put them back in. That whole project's about $250,000. And then we'll move downriver, and they'll probably be working on the river locks for the next 2 years. You have Sally heading towards us to the south from Pensacola this morning. And as she's moving through there, FEMA will go in there the next couple of days. And anyone that's signed up on the disaster repository will be notified for assistance to go down to cut up trees, to remove debris, to do assessments, to assist with all the FEMA related items that Sally would create. I do from environmental, work with farmers. If you have inventions, I had one farmer had me up on his grain elevator because they have a tendency to blow up because of the methane levels. He created a device that measures that methane level, and his grandson came up with an app that he can read it on his phone, and he can stand on the ground and click it up and tell what the methane levels in his storage units. You don't have to go up there anymore. Well, now he ended up selling that through the Small Business Innovative Research through the university system, and they commercialized that as a product, and USDA was one of the first government agencies to buy his devices. And that was all because he just had an idea, and he had a grandson who knew how to do apps. So my little mind's about to explode, because as I travel around, I see government everywhere. And then I try and think, well, who can I match to this, to do this on that type service? Another final example, you're doing janitorial work, and you take an Indiana map and you draw a 60-mile circle, and you start counting up the towns from Columbus, and there's over 140 towns within 1 hour drive out with 10 counties. And if you send your capability statement out virtually to all those city clerks and to town clerks and county commissions, and or to the cities in that circle, and picked up 10% of 150, you'd be cleaning 15 town halls in the next 12 months. Your big problem would be finding labor and equipment and parts. And I've had that happen 2 times already down in Jeffersonville and over near Bedford, where we did that type of from town level, not at the federal level down. So those are probably pretty good examples.
I think you mentioned to me beer and liquor and
Oh yeah,
wines.
I'm working with 3 distilleries right now. I won't name them all, but you probably drink their liquor. I'm assisting them to sell their liquor in over 109 military installations worldwide and on Navy ships or out in the oceans. They're called Class 6 stores. And if I have any veterans, if you go to Camp Atterbury, the Class 6 stores across the street from the commissary, and that's where they sell liquor and beer and other items. And that process to get into the Armed Forces Exchange system to sell those products and services just isn't limited to liquor. It could be any item that's sold at the commissary or the post exchanges. So it's a matter of how you think outside your box and what your business plan is.
Andy, thank you so much for coming out. It's good to see you. Quick question for you. Let's say that I had a good or a service and I was sometimes very interested in trying to secure a government contract. What's my very first step?
First step is, if you're going to use me, is to give me your permission by filling out an online 1-page request for counseling. It automatically creates a record, and then I'll do a government procurement action plan laying out the 3 phases: administrative, marketing, and winning a contract. And then as we're going through that, I actually have a printed roadmap that shows you all the different things that you're going to have. And as we're going through that, if I don't see something that's not lined up, like you're not registered with the Secretary of State of Indiana, you don't have a DUNS number. And I love to look at business plans. I like to see where in that business plan did you insert in there government sales? And if you don't have it in there, I'll show you how to put one in there and how to develop that market. So that'd be kind of the initial steps. Good question. Gosh, I'm keeping us, we're right on time here. Got 2 minutes to go.
Ah, you're just that good, Andy.
No, it's just this chamber is so well organized.
Hey, I think the information's just been fantastic. And
Good.
I think, you know, some of your advice about offering best value in your contract, I mean, whether you're doing a government contract or not, the steps the way you illustrated that is just a best practice, right? How you showcase the value to your customers. Just that little nugget alone was worth my hour today. Thank you so much.
Now, if y'all want to see more things like this on how to write a proposal, how to do cost estimating, how to market, how to look up a NACS code, we do workshops on all these. You just you can email me or down there to the bottom line, Indiana PTAC, click on events, just like at the chamber here. When I look at their events, I can see things lined up. I call that professional development, and we're all entitled to professional development, keep up our skill sets in our companies and that. Well, I'll turn my presentation back over to you, Cindy, and I sure appreciate you all having me here today. Anyone that needs me, you know where my email is, and I'll see you out there.
Andy, we've recorded this, so we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel with your permission.
All right.
All right. So if anyone wants to revisit it, they certainly can do that.
Okay.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and we look forward to hosting another session in the near future with you, Andy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Goodbye, all.
Thanks,
Bye.
Andy.
All right, thanks, Andy.
What do you
That's a
think?
lot of good information.
Well, I
Yeah.
did have a script.
No, that was very good.